In early 2026, the world watches as the United States and Iran stand on a knife's edge. Diplomatic efforts have failed, tensions are rising, and both nations are preparing for possible conflict. Iran's supreme leader warns that any U.S. military strike will ignite a regional war, a warning that cannot be ignored. Across the globe, governments, analysts, and citizens hold their breath. Could a single strike spark a war that engulfs the entire Middle East? To understand the stakes, we must look at the history of U.S.-Iran relations. The hostility began in 1979 with the overthrow of the Shah, a close American ally, and the Iranian hostage crisis. Since then, decades of distrust have shaped Iran's foreign policy. Tehran has built an extensive network of proxy groups across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Its missile capabilities and unconventional strategies allow Iran to project power far beyond its borders. Every threat the United States issues is met with careful, calculated responses, often through intermediaries rather than direct confrontation. Iran's nuclear program has long been a point of contention. U.S. officials warn that Tehran's ability to enrich uranium and develop ballistic missiles represents an existential threat to regional allies and global security. Every test, every satellite launch, every missile drill is scrutinized by intelligence agencies around the world. The possibility of miscalculation, one missile launched in anger, one misinterpreted radar blip, could turn tensions into full-scale war. The United States has positioned naval, air, and ground forces across the region. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, and F-35 squadrons patrol the Persian Gulf, ready to respond. Bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and elsewhere serve as hubs for intelligence, logistics, and rapid strike capabilities. Protecting allies, maintaining navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, and deterring Iranian aggression remain the Pentagon's top priorities. Every movement, every deployment sends a message, but also escalates the tension. The risk of escalation is ever present. Even a single miscalculation, a drone strike gone wrong, or a misunderstanding in the Gulf could ignite a conflict that spreads beyond Iran's borders. Proxy networks across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen could act in seconds. Regional allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia watch anxiously, prepared to respond to any aggression. And the global economy, from oil markets to international trade, braces for shock waves. What starts as a limited strike could become a chain reaction, engulfing the Middle East in chaos. This is the dangerous reality of 2026, and the world is watching. The first U.S. strikes hit Iran, targeting missile depots, command centers, and Revolutionary Guard bases near major cities. Precision-guided munitions limit civilian casualties, but the message is clear. America is willing to act. Tehran, however, will not remain silent. Within hours, Iran launches missiles and drones toward U.S. bases in Iraq and the Persian Gulf. Simultaneously, its proxy militias across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen mobilize. Baghdad experiences coordinated strikes on convoys and military positions. In Syria, Iranian-backed forces prepare to challenge Israel and disrupt American surveillance. Hezbollah in Lebanon fires rockets toward northern Israel, signaling a widening conflict. Even Yemen's Houthis strike Saudi ports, threatening vital shipping lanes and energy exports. The retaliation is swift, coordinated, and calculated, a demonstration of Iran's reach. Israel watches carefully. Its northern cities are under threat from Hezbollah rockets. and intelligence confirms Iranian missile deployments near Lebanon and Syria. Israeli leadership debates preemptive strikes to protect civilians and strategic assets. Fighter jets carry out surgical operations against missile depots and command posts, sending a clear message. Any escalation toward Israel will be met with force. The Northern Front has the potential to ignite a broader war, drawing Israel into a regional conflict it has long sought to avoid. The crisis does not go unnoticed. Russia warns the United States about unintended consequences, urging restraint. Moscow increases air and naval patrols in the Caspian and Persian Gulf to monitor the conflict. China calls for immediate diplomacy, positioning itself as a mediator. Europe urges calm, but internal divisions emerge. Some nations support U.S. actions, others caution against escalation. Meanwhile, energy markets react instantly. Oil prices surge, stock markets tumble, and global trade begins to wobble under the pressure of uncertainty. Even limited strikes trigger widespread instability. Military operations intensify across multiple fronts. Proxies are mobilized, regional allies brace for escalation, and civilians live under constant threat. The world begins to realize the fragile nature of peace in the Middle East. A single strike, once thought contained, now has the potential to ignite a much larger conflict. And as the smoke rises over Iran, the question looms: how far will this war spread? As the U.S. strikes and Iranian retaliation unfold, the conflict spreads like wildfire across the region. Proxy networks, trained, armed, and coordinated by Tehran, are now fully mobilized. What began as a targeted strike is transforming into a multi-front regional crisis. In Iraq, Shiite militias attack U.S. convoys and bases, turning Baghdad into a battlefield. Syrian territories along the Israeli border see increased Iranian and allied troop movements, preparing to challenge both U.S. and Israeli forces. Lebanon's Hezbollah fires rockets into northern Israel, threatening civilian centers and military infrastructure. In Yemen, Houthi rebels disrupt critical shipping lanes, targeting Saudi ports and oil exports. The domino effect is clear. The region is teetering on the edge of widespread war. The world economy reacts immediately. Oil prices surge beyond $150 per barrel. Shipping insurance premiums spike. Energy-dependent nations scramble to secure alternative sources. Stock markets wobble under the uncertainty, while nations from Europe to Asia brace for financial shockwaves. The cost of regional conflict is no longer just military. It is economic, humanitarian, and global. The Pentagon now faces difficult choices. Should the United States expand its strikes deeper into Iranian territory? How can it counter simultaneous drone and missile attacks without triggering full-scale war? Additional carrier strike groups and F-35 squadrons are deployed. Special operations missions are prepared to neutralize key targets. Every decision carries enormous consequences, balancing deterrence against escalation. Even as military operations intensify, diplomacy is not forgotten. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar attempt back-channel negotiations to prevent a regional catastrophe. Global powers urge restraint, warning that further escalation could engulf the Middle East and impact the world beyond. Yet every strike, every counterattack brings the possibility of wider war closer to reality. As the conflict rages, the human cost becomes undeniable. Civilians in Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen face power outages, destroyed infrastructure, and the constant threat of violence. Hospitals struggle, food and water supplies are disrupted, and families are forced to flee. The war that began with a single strike now casts a shadow across an entire region. Displacement grows rapidly. Millions of people are uprooted from their homes, seeking safety in neighboring regions. Refugee camps swell beyond capacity, and international aid agencies struggle to provide basic necessities. Water shortages, damaged hospitals, and destroyed schools create long-term suffering that will last years after the bombs stop falling. The region remains on edge. Proxy forces, Israel, and Gulf allies prepare for further escalation. The United States must carefully calibrate its response, showing strength while avoiding full-scale war. Diplomatic channels remain open, yet every missile, every strike, increases the risk of miscalculation. Leaders realize that in this fragile balance, a single mistake could escalate into a regional conflagration. Energy markets are in turmoil. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest oil choke points, sees disrupted shipping. Prices surge, inflation spreads globally, and nations scramble to secure alternative energy sources. Stock markets react violently, and supply chains for essential goods are threatened. The economic consequences are felt from Europe to Asia, showing how interconnected the world has become. Even a limited U.S. strike carries consequences far beyond its intended targets. The conflict demonstrates the delicate web of geopolitics, energy dependence, and proxy networks in the Middle East. Deterrence, diplomacy, and military readiness must coexist, or the risk of regional and even global catastrophe remains ever present. In 2026, the world is reminded, one strike can change the course of history, and peace remains fragile.